Terrific. So, welcome everyone to another episode of Local Government Education Programming. Today's program is entitled The Role of Downtown Development in Attracting and Retaining Young Talent, a topic that everybody's interested in, brought to you by University of Illinois Extension. My name is Mike Delaney, and I'm an Extension Community and Economic Development Educator based up here in the Northern State Line region in Ogle County. We'll begin with some familiar housekeeping notes. First off, please note that you can, on your own, access the Zoom closed captioning function if you need it using the button at the bottom of your screen. We are, as you will note, recording today's webinar, and we'll be making it available on our Community and Economic Development YouTube channel to anyone who's registered. If you didn't register, that's fine. You can still get them. Just be sure to drop your email into the chat at some point, letting us know that you'd like to be added to that distribution list. As always, you'll be welcome at any time to share your questions in the chat box. We will be having a Q&A session following the main presentation, so drop your questions in as they occur to you. Now, of course, we are happy to welcome back our presenter for today, our Community and Economic Development colleague here at Extension, Pam Schallhorn. Pam is a regional extension specialist in community and economic development. She has spent the last decade examining what prompts people, especially young adults between the ages of 20 and 39, to return to or remain in their communities. Pam holds a master's degree in political studies and a bachelor's in finance and has a background as a commercial lender and as a director of a small business development center. Again, welcome and thank you to Pam for being here. Pam, the stage is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Mike and Nancy, for having me again, and everybody that's coming online. I really appreciate it. So let's get started here. Um, so the first thing I want to do is define, I am going to open the chat box because I want you to tell me, how do you define young talent? What are we looking for? What are your thoughts? I'm opening the chat box, so go ahead and just put some 1, 2, 3 word responses in. And this is just a test to make sure you're all listening to me out there. How do you define the young talent, Mike? I don't see anybody jumping in there to put one in there. You're on mute. Sorry, Mike. I asked you
No,
to mute.
no, that's a good question, Pam. I think at a gut level, I would define it as people who have an interest in their local community and an energy that they're willing to contribute to the local community.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we've got some. Thank you, Mike. I knew the minute you put something in there that we'd get more. So they're innovative. They're 20 to 50, 27 and under, college educated professionals, likely lifetime income, ambitious, a young person with unique skills and new ideas, anyone with budding talent, creative, engaged in their community, passionate leaders, anyone from any field who contributes to the community. Thank you. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that feedback. Yeah, finding young talent is the hard part. When I put this together, first of all, because I primarily work with rural communities, but I've also worked in larger urban communities like Rockford and Springfield. And excuse me. And so it's and when you're in a rural community, and this is a personal opinion, anyone under 50 is considered young, in my opinion, because there's been so much population loss that there just aren't a lot of young people left. But we're losing young adults in all across the state of Illinois, whether they're rural or urban. I just want to mention that there's also talent, young talent can be welders that you need in your manufacturing firms. They can be young lawyers, healthcare professionals. We all know how much we need those and how difficult it is to attract those young health professionals. I mean, that's part of the reason why a lot of healthcare facilities are closing. So there's a lot of ways to define that young talent, but the one thing I think we can all agree on is we need more of it in both rural and urban communities. So I want to just talk about is how how downtown revitalization, how I've seen it, the research, what I've seen in the research, what I've seen personally, and what I've heard back from several of the communities that I'm going to discuss in this program. Now, I've read a couple of research-based articles, surveys that have been done on site selectors. Site selectors going out to decide where they're going to put commercial buildings or where they're going to maybe put a factory in. These site selectors, this is what the articles are saying. 30 years ago, all you needed was cheap land and cheap employees, inexpensive employees. And that's what they got a lot of in rural communities when they started moving factories out of, say, Rockford and Springfield and Chicago into rural communities across the state. But now, in the last 5 to 10 years, it's changed because the young adults have changed. And it's not about just cheap land and inexpensive or lower waged employees. What it's about whether or not their employees even want to live in your community. So if you've been struggling with site selectors, if you're getting out there and trying to draw more manufacturing or industrial or commercial investment in your community, you need to start with a few things. And one of them is that downtown you have. And hopefully it's not quite this bad, but it could be. And if it is, we need to talk about it. Now, first of all, before we even jump into downtown revitalization, this is something that I learned just recently going around to smaller communities that are like less than 7,500 people. If you are not infrastructure ready, you don't need a site selector to come in because you're not going to check any of their boxes. You've got to work on that infrastructure first, even before downtown revitalization. You need the broadband, you need the sewer and sanitation. And I can't believe how many mayors and small community leaders that have told me that their sanitation systems are not up to par. You know, they can't have an open pond. The system they have is antiquated. And many smaller rural communities, everyone's living on a septic tank or with a septic tank. So broadband, sewers, water systems, technology, sidewalks, and I say bikeable, but you know, that might be pushing it a little bit, but definitely the broadband, sewer, water systems, and technology. You have to have these things. If you don't have them, this is where you need to start. Okay, so just want to put that in before I jump into revitalizing downtown. Now, the problem is we're losing young people. And part of this is due to the difference between the death rate is higher, birth rate is lower. This is a report, and I will send you this. Everyone will get one. It's a report that Zach Kennedy at the University of Illinois put together for me and for my programs on reversing the exodus of youth. Now, what I want you to look at is Joe Daviess County. It's second from the left. Okay, I could go actually down any one of these columns, but I'm going to use this one because it's a good example. Excuse me for covering my voice there for a minute. So let's start with the population change. They lost 1,299 people between 2010 and 2020. So their population dropped from 22,728 down to 21,429. So they lost 5.7%. Now to look at that, you don't want to lose population, but that doesn't look terribly horrible until we drop down to the next few lines on this report. Under 5 population dropped by 23.4%. And that probably has a lot to do with the birth rate, but also young families that are leaving or not moving into that county. Get to school age population, lost about 10.8%. Now, just those two are a concern because of schools. And we know a lot of rural communities and even larger communities are struggling keeping their schools alive. But you've dropped 10.8 in that 5 to 19 population. Young adults, 20 to 39 that we're talking about, we lost 12.7%. And then finally, the working age adults, which is defined by the Census Bureau as 20 to 59, although like me, a lot of us work a lot longer than age 59. they've lost 16.9% in that total category. What they have increased is 60 and older. Nothing wrong with that. Everyone's getting older in these communities. But the problem is we don't have enough young families moving in. We don't have enough young talent moving in to take the jobs to become new leaders. So I'm going to talk about the things that after reading about 30 or 40 research-based articles on this, working with communities across the state, and I'm going to highlight a couple of them as we go through. This is a critical issue, and these are some of the things you can do, and this is why I say focusing on downtown revitalization can be crucial for you, regardless of the size of your community or where you're located. Okay, millennials, real quickly. Right now, they're 29 to 45. I can't believe they were only about 19 when I started this research. They're adventurous, creative, and enjoy social contact. I know a lot of you think that they don't like social contact. They're always on their phone, but that's not true. They really do like hanging out with their peers. Millennials are the entrepreneurial generation. We're going to talk about entrepreneurial development and the need for that opportunity in your community if these young people are going to be excited about moving there or want to stay there. They're victims of the Great Recession. I think a lot of us know that they've waited longer to buy homes and start families, primarily because of the level of educational debt, student loan debt that they have carried. And they have kind of changed the paradigm, which their the younger generation, even younger than the millennials, the Gen Zs, really are buying into this wholeheartedly, and that is they work to live. They do not live to work. I think the boomers had a tendency to live to work. Work, their career was everything. Yet the millennials and the young adults, the Gen Zers, this isn't how they want it. Now, the Gen Zs, age 29 and under, I cannot believe they're 28, 29 years old now. They're digital natives with global connectivity. Never forget that. For those of you that are dealing with site selectors, and I know some of these older economic developers, and I'm going to say older, they're as old as me or older. I've been around a long time. I've been in economic development since the late 80s, so I've seen this progression. They think that we need jobs right there, right on site. We've got to have those jobs if we're going to increase population. No, that's not the case anymore. Because of the global connectivity, many of these young people remote work or they've developed online businesses and they're going global. They're digital natives. The Gen Zers were born after the iPhone was invented. They do not know a world without an iPhone, without broadband. So it's really important to understand the concepts of these young people before we start to attract young talent into, well, however we define it, or try to attract or retain that young talent. And this is where we run into problems too. The complaints aren't necessarily from the young people that won't move in. It's the ones that are living there now. And I'm going to give you some hints on how some communities have worked with their young people to build that recognition and make them feel like they're welcome and make them feel like they want to stay in a community, rural or urban. They want work-life balance. That's back to the work to live. Work-life balance and personal well-being is very important to them. They also grew up in a time of rampant misinformation, so they are less trusting. So you really have to put your, so to speak, money where your mouth is. You've got to be honest with them, and they want that. They want to be able to build that trust. Okay, what do young adults want? After all the research I've done, these are the things that if you're trying to attract or retain your young adults or more young adults or more young talent into your community, this is what you need to do. Just this one checklist. And by the way, I should have mentioned if you're taking copious notes or hitting print screen, Nancy or Mike are going to be sending you an email either tomorrow or Monday that will include a PDF copy of the slides, a link to the recording, and I will also be sending you any references or resources that I talk about today during this program, like that report, that county report on the reduction in population by category. But here's what the young adults want. They don't want it. They have to have it. High-speed internet. Now, I do watch some young people that I've worked with in rural communities that actually use their smartphone and they have a link and unlimited, connectivity. And that's the way they work. They have to work from their iPhone because broadband isn't good enough for them. But generally, it's because those young people really want to live there. Maybe their family lives in the rural area and they want to stay there. But high-speed internet is a must. It's like electricity. It's like having gas to your house. It's like having running water and flushing toilets. You need high-speed internet today. They want to live in a community that invests in youth priorities, especially outdoor amenities and recreational opportunities. Very important. They want more third spaces, and this is really important for remote workers. Not work, not home, but all young people, whether it's an internet cafe, a lot of them like craft breweries, dog parks are incredibly popular. These are third spaces, not work, not home, but somewhere they can go and hang out with their colleagues, hang out with other people, hang out with people that, their friends and their dogs and have fun. They want economic opportunities through entrepreneurship and an invitation to be actively engaged in their communities. Now, I put an invitation. Millennials and Gen Zers are different. They want to be asked. They need to be asked. If you want to engage them in your community, ask them. And there's a gentleman, Mayor Ken Williams from Oregon, Illinois, and his commissioner, Terry Schuster. They actually, about 8 or 9 years ago, they went out and tried to find a young person, young talent, to come on to their city commission to help them balance it out, the commission out, and also to give them great ideas on how they're doing, how they can do more to attract it. I really give them a lot of credit, Ken and Terry, for doing this. And they found one, a young woman. Her name is, excuse me, I have my notes here. Her name is, I will find it. No, I won't. Okay. I can't think of her name right offhand, but she had an accounting degree. She was only about 27 or 28, and she's been a commissioner for several years, I think at least 5 or 6 years now. So that's how you need to invite if you want to invite these young people, if you want them actively engaged in your community, and you do. You also need to be, a welcoming community. And I'm going to talk more about that in a minute. Um, Now, in 2014, there was a huge report from the American Planning Association that said that small towns will have to hustle to recruit and retain millennials. Okay. They urged local planners to mimic the appeal of city centers by creating density. That means keeping walkable neighborhoods, traditional downtown centers that millennials say are key to making a community a desirable place to live. I've recently read more research, and it's the same today for both millennials and Gen Zs. These walkable neighborhoods, and by the way, it's becoming more important to boomers, walkable downtowns. Okay, so the site selectors want to see those downtowns rebuilt because they want their employees to be happy, young people and even older people. But they've been saying this since 2014. We're in 2024. If your community is not actively involved in any of these things, then I really suggest you take some time to sit down and think about it and start doing some strategic planning that is around this revitalizing your downtowns in your downtown centers in your communities. Okay, what do I call downtown revitalization? This is what I have seen work. I saw it work in Rockford, Illinois, about 14 years ago before I ever came to work here. And I'll talk about that in a minute. I came to work for Extension. But I've also seen it work. This, for example, is Marion, Illinois. And I'm going to talk about a couple others too. You want to focus on entertainment in your downtown, arts, music, and food. Millennials and Gen Zers love food. They call themselves foodies. Okay. It has been a great way, whether it's in a pop-up shop in a vendor market in downtown or you actually have a full blown out restaurant. Doesn't make much of a difference. They like different kinds of foods, different ethnic foods. They like different cultural foods. Retail retention. If you were in my program a couple weeks ago on planning for the future of small rural communities, retail retention, attracting retail in your downtown, don't spend a lot of time on this. Retail is really, really tough. You've got to have someone who really knows retail, maybe someone who's doing retail in a storefront and online, because online competition is just so, I mean, it's there, it's real, and it makes it very difficult to keep a retail operation running in your downtown. But if you have retail downtown, you do everything you can to keep it. You help them in any way you can. You help them market. So you do events to get more people downtown so that they have the opportunity for the sales. You want that retail, but focus on that retail retention. Entrepreneurial training and opportunities, and the younger, the better. You know, if you don't have an SBDC, I have a community, Mendota, Illinois, that's coming up with some really interesting ways to support their entrepreneurs because the SBDC Center in Peru closed. Okay, SBDCs can be an integral part with those business plans. But if you can just find maybe people in your community or reach out to the CED staff, extension staff that you have in your area. For instance, Mike's in Ogle County, and see what kind of programming they might have. Maybe even programs that have been recorded. This doesn't have to be a one-on-one. That's very a traditional way of doing entrepreneurial training. It can be online, and make the videos short. You want to know how to do sales tax in Illinois? Create a 10-minute video on how to do sales tax in Illinois and have it online. Have it on your economic development website for your community. A whole series of little, you could probably go into YouTube and collect them there. I know Extension CED team has quite a few of them too. There's different ways to do it, but you just want to make sure that business development, entrepreneurial training, and opportunities are ready. It's what young people want. Housing options, I'm going to talk about those too, but downtowns in both rural and urban communities make great places to live if you've created this walkable environment and you have retail and you have food and you have music and you have art. Now, it may not be as big in a smaller town as it is in a metropolitan area, but some is better than nothing. And this is what the young folks are looking for. And then you want to create that fun factor. A gentleman, city manager from Greenville, say that, oh, I get this. They want to have fun. Yes, exactly. Turn your downtown into that heart of your community, that center. And then make sure you welcome everybody, regardless of who they are, young, old, male, female, transgender. I don't care if they're Hispanic, Latino, African American, white. When you're downtown, everybody's welcome. When we talk about healthcare, I don't know about you, but I do know that a bulk of the people that are filling these healthcare centers, okay, they are from different countries. They've immigrated here and they are from different countries. Now, the thing is they get into a rural community or a rural area, they don't find it welcoming. There's no fun. There's no housing options. They're not feeling welcome. No one's coming to say, gee, we're really glad you moved here, doctor. Okay, the thing is that all of a sudden they don't want to live there. Then you don't have healthcare facilities. And then you go, well, what happened? Why don't we have healthcare facilities? Well, it's not just about money. A lot of times what it is you can't keep talent because you don't invite them to become part of your community. Who wants to live somewhere where they're not welcome? No one. Okay, an entrepreneurial culture. We talked about business education and counseling, vendor markets and pop-up shops, shared workspaces, incentives for small businesses, buy local campaigns, buying local and having a culture of buy local, is really important to young entrepreneurs and to young people. They like that. In fact, in one survey of young people I did, they didn't want a Walmart in town. They wanted to continue to focus on small business development in their downtown and buying local. By the way, this was Nashville, Illinois, in Washington County, a town of about 3,500. They have a very, very strong buy local culture there, to the point where one of our office support people said, I don't dare go to Lowe's and buy a washer and dryer. You buy it in Washington County. They have a really strong buy local, but they also have one of the most successful um, industrial parks in the state. In fact, they were number one. They increased by 600 manufacturing jobs in that industrial park between 2013 and 2023. Another report I have, but I'm not sharing it here. I can send it out though. You might like to see who's doing well in manufacturing. So buy local can have a huge benefit on a community. It builds that community. People want to live there, people want to work there, or and so that's when site selectors want to bring their businesses there, where entrepreneurs want to build their businesses. Now, when I talk about pop-up shops, this photograph is of Centralia, Illinois, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about Centralia, Illinois. In fact, I have some things I want to report out here, and I want to make sure I have them before I hit the next slide. Okay. Let's talk about investing in youth priorities. As we mentioned, the young are business-minded, but place great value on social contacts. They love outdoor amenities and creating those third places, spaces, not home, not work, recreational opportunities, and finally ask them what they want. Now, this photograph is of Crooked Creek Winery in downtown Centralia. This is an amazing place. It's one of those third places spaces where the young adults, well, and older adults, anyone over 21, can hang out. But this started with a story with a pop-up shop. There's a gentleman named Marcus Holland, who is the director of Greater Centralia Chamber of Commerce. And Marcus and I were working together a few years back. It's actually been quite a few years back. And he decided to have a Christmas walk in the downtown. And we were talking about, he went store to door till he found places that say, oh yeah, if you want to come in and clean up this vacant building, we'll let you do something here. Well, Crooked Creek Winery is quite a famous winery near Centralia, but all their retail was done out at the winery, out of town. Marcus really wanted them downtown. So what they did is they set up a makeshift bar in one of these vacant buildings in downtown Centralia. And wouldn't you know it, it just went over well. I mean, the place was packed, and they were selling wine, and so anyway, it wasn't too long. In fact, I think they opened the doors or tried to open the doors to this Crooked Creek Winery downtown, the actual wine bar, like right as COVID hit. So I've got to give them credit for sticking with it, but it's become a very popular place. But I want to just tell you what Marcus sent me this, and I'm going to read it to you. I've got time to read it. All right. Because when I was talking about Centralia in my last program a few weeks ago, he wrote me and he said, oh, there's more, Pam. I just want you to have the facts. So here they are. Really, the downtown revitalization started with a couple named Ray and Chris Kridgen, who opened Daddy-O's Tattoos and Rail Coffee Room. That Rail Coffee Room, that coffee shop was really, really important. But I remember when I walked in there, and it must have been about 2015, I think, sometime in 2015, they were just doing the build out. And Chris was there. And I remember it was my first interaction with anyone. I peeked my head in and I said, Chris, I said, so you're doing all this work. I said, how is it to work with the city? Because most of the time I'm hearing from businesses, oh, can't get through, can't get our permits, nobody calls me back. Chris said, they're great. Centralia is great. It was so easy. So this is where this is what you want to hear. And if you're not hearing this, if you're going out and you're talking to your small businesses and they're saying, oh, it's hell to work with this city, excuse my French, um, you want to hear what Chris said in Centralia in 2015. They were so helpful. The city was so helpful. Now, here is his report, Marcus's report back to me. Shannon and Mindy Cooney, who own Crooked Creek Winery, had a pop-up in 2018, opened the downtown wine bar in 2020, and started a development company that now holds a dozen properties being developed. By the way, they use historic tax credits, and I have more information on that. If you need it, email me. There are new retailers and services already open, and a brewery soon. They just purchased the Centralia House historic restaurant, and also they have second floor apartments in the near future. I also know that they have opened a couple of Airbnbs on the second floor of their buildings. So here's just one young couple, and that was another thing that I think really worked for Centralia, is most of these young leaders were just coming in, and they were all pretty young themselves. I mean, I remember Marcus and I debating on whether to call them young adults or millennials because he was a millennial himself. There's another group, two women who started a clothing vendor, then rented a space in downtown, then purchased that building, outgrew it, purchased another building, and are renting out the former building to a new retailer. And then finally, another business has purchased the Commonwealth with 3 renovated retail spaces, 6 apartments upstairs opening this summer, and eventually reopening the Green Grill historic restaurant. Centralia is a population of 11,848. They have some really young people that have gotten involved. They've got an entrepreneurial culture going on. They've used pop-up shops. They've had vendor events, and they've got a chamber of commerce that does a lot of different things. And I've got to give him some big kudos to Marcus and his group, the Coonies, and all the people in Centralia that have done this. And truthfully, I will give you their names on a slide at the end because there's others I'm going to talk to. But if you ever want to know, I'd give Marcus a call and find out what he did if you're struggling in your own community. Okay, housing options in downtown. First time I saw housing options being used in downtown was in Rockford, Illinois. And it was a gentleman named Justin Fern who owns Urban Equity Properties. This was one of the first buildings he did. And I don't know if you can see it, but up in the right-hand corner, you'll see no vacancies. The apartments in this building were rented out before they even got them finished. I'd love to ask Marcus in Centralia if he's finding the same thing in downtown Centralia. Okay. Downtown living appeals to not, according to the research, appeals to both boomers and millennials, but primarily millennials and now the Gen Zers. They want it walkable. It works both in rural and urban areas. We're talking about Rockford here, population 146,000, Centralia 11,000. It doesn't matter. That downtown living is critical. And with housing shortages everywhere, why would we not try to reutilize these old buildings we have downtown? What a great place to have it. Now, historic preservation credits were used in downtown Rockford. They were also used in Centralia. Both Centralia and downtown Rockford already had commercial historic preservation districts in their downtowns. LaSalle has one. Leland, Illinois is working on one. Springfield has one in their downtown. You'll find several communities. There is an application process. There's an expert named Quinn Adamowski, and I am going to put him in the resources, his contact information. He's with Landmarks, Illinois, and if you want to know how to use historic tax credits, in fact, he can tell you how to even stack your tax credits. He's an expert on this, but definitely want to take a look at this with your old buildings downtown. Housing is not only great, this is what young people are looking for, and some older people are also looking for it. Obviously, there's accessibility issues. You want to make sure these buildings have things like elevators, but if you've still got a TIF in your downtown, this is another place where you might be able to find ways to finance some of these buildings. And of course, here was a quote from a newspaper article a couple years ago from C. Wilson, who's the vice president of Urban Equity Properties. We've seen a lot of younger millennial type people moving into downtown. We've also seen some empty nester folks as well, but the majority of folks moving in are millennials. Rockford started the Rockford City Market with pop-up shops, and I was his SBDC director there. I helped start the Rockford City Market. I was on their initial steering committee for 4 years. It went from pop-ups to downtown stores to housing on the second floor. Downtown Rockford has been completely redeveloped. I mean, you wouldn't know it from 10, 14 years, 10, 12 years ago. Centralia is using this concept. Oregon, Illinois is working with this concept. Marion, Illinois is working with this concept. So Sterling, Illinois. This is something that works, not just urban or rural. It is taking a little bit of downtown Chicago and bringing it downtown wherever, Illinois, but it just, the millennials just, and the younger generation, they just want to feel some of that energy, that downtown energy that you can get in the larger places, but you don't have to be a large city to do it. Remote workers. Oh, this is excellent. You want to talk about young talent that can walk in to your community with a laptop under their arm and make a 6+ figure salary. Okay. 34% of workers in Illinois worked from home. Now, in metropolitan areas, it's more about 50%. And in rural communities, it's more about 10 or 12%, but this is just remote workers, workers that are working for a company that is not in town and they can work from their home or have a hybrid option. This does not count all of those social media influencers. And when we were doing the Reversing the Exodus program, and we had these young adult panels, I can't tell you how many of these young adults, especially, it was actually seeing more women than men at the time, but they were actually they were social media influencers, or they were doing social media or website designed for a company that was 1,000 miles away from them. So remote workers are important. They generally have greater income, higher levels of education, but you need to invest in the infrastructure and resources. Do you have internet cafe or somewhere where they can hang out and get good internet in the downtown? Is your community the place they want to live? And if you don't have great broadband, well, you're probably not going to attract these young people. But a lot of young people have moved away from rural communities and wouldn't mind moving back closer to their families. If they're remote workers, they can do that. And I love this quote: states will need to compete to attract individual talent rather than trying to get companies to relocate. We look at a small manufacturing firm with 200 employees. Well, can you imagine what kind of economic impact if you brought, say, 20 six-figure plus remote workers into your community? Could be a huge economic impact. So remote workers and having the infrastructure, having the downtown that they want to hang in, it's critical. Now, welcoming. And this, I'm sorry, but rural communities and even communities sometimes like Rockford, Bloomington, and Springfield, who, by the way, are still very, very segregated. Creating an environment where all people feel accepted, welcomed, and respected, where every person feels connected, seen, and valued. Okay? When people are coming into your community and they're talented and they're bringing their education and they're bringing their families, or maybe they're not the elite of your talent, but maybe they are workers who are going to work as welders in your manufacturing firms. Everyone wants to be noticed. Everyone wants to feel connected. Everyone wants to feel like this is their community and they can be a part of it. Now, I know not every community in this state, and especially some of the rural communities, are not very welcoming. Well, if that's the case and that's where you want to stay, Well, you're not going to be able to attract the talent you need. You're not going to be able to attract the young people that you need. You're not going to be able to attract talent of any age. Okay. Now, I pulled this out of a couple research-based articles in the last few days because I think welcoming is becoming one of the biggest hurdles for some of these communities. And the communities I'm talking about, I feel like maybe every community could do a little bit better, but I think the communities I've been talking about are trying. They're really trying. One, adopt a formal welcoming plan at the city level. How do we welcome our new residents in? How do we make sure that they're comfortable and they have what they need and they want to stay? You want to share that welcoming information and happenings on social media and on your website. You want conscious and intentional design of rural welcoming events. It's crucial. Host gatherings in your downtown, spaces where newcomers can bring their own food and culinary traditions, music, and cultural norms to an event. Remember what I said about the foodies? Remember what I said about young adults wanting this different kind of food? But in the same token, you're not trying to integrate these people into your community and make them like you. You want them to be able to bring their own food, their own culinary traditions, their own music, their own cultural norms. And then hopefully your existing residents can be open enough to this to engage and bring these people into the community. And if needed, create a cultural advisory board for the city. Especially for communities, and I know there's lots of them in Illinois that have large immigrant populations. And I don't mean immediately immigrant. They didn't immigrate in the last year or two. These are communities that have had immigrants living in the community for 3, 4, 5 generations. Um, I think probably one I think of the most is Mendota, which is 35 to 40% Hispanic Latino. They have started to do many of these things like having special festivals, being able to share food and culinary traditions. When we started the Rockford City Market, Asian, Mexican, Latino, food, all of this different food, all of these African Americans, we invited them all into the Rockford City Market. And what it meant is it was just your palate's paradise. You were able to eat all these different kinds of food. I want you to look at the positive rather than the fear factor that we have about people coming into our community that we don't know. If you don't know them, you feel uncomfortable, then get to know them, meet them, have a festival, and bring it downtown. Downtown is the center of your community. Bring it downtown and enjoy this. Actively engage and consult youth. Now, this is what young people want. They want to be consulted. They want to be invited in. Make sure they know that their opinions and ideas matter. Show them that you want them to stay. Include them in your community planning and local government. And you certainly want to do this because why we would want to build a future that looks like something I'm going to live in for how long? I turned 70 last August. Okay. We need to build it for the future, for the young people. We need to bring in things that they want. And how do we know what we want if we don't ask them? So you want to get your own young people together and you want to ask them. Now, your meeting structures may need to change. And I always joke about this, but I had a young adult who went to a county board meeting because her grandfather was on the county board and was encouraging her to run, which I thought was great. But she went to the meeting. The meeting lasted 3 hours. She didn't go again for another year because he continued to harp on her, and she went another year later. The meeting still ran 3 hours, and she swore that everything they talked about the year before. Okay, so you may need to change your meeting structures because the young people, they have a lot more to do. They like this work-life balance. They really want to make sure that if they're getting involved in something, that it's going to mean something. It's going to move forward. You might need to figure out how some of those meetings can be shorter. Maybe they can be via Zoom. I know there are laws regarding what kind of what kind of meetings you can have. But still, if you're a museum and you want to work with volunteers and you can't get young people to come to your meetings, see if you can set them up via Zoom. See if you can bring them in by webinar. That way they can feed the kids and come to your meeting and volunteer and be one of your volunteers. Sometimes it just takes thinking a little bit different. It's not like we have to change completely. We just have to kind of move a little bit one way or the other. And then create a young adult advisory panel. And I want to talk about two and the results from two. I give a program called Reversing the Exodus. Many of you may have seen it. And at the end, afterwards, we hold a young adult panel, which is by far the best part of the program. Now, that panel was a recommendation of Chris Noble, the second box here, Executive Director of Sauk Valley Chamber. Right after we did that at Sauk Valley College back in 2018, she started a young adult advisory panel. Now, I will send you a link to a video where she talks with me about how she started that young adult panel. Okay. The group which is called Sauk Valley Keystone, raised $60,000 to build a dog park in Sterling within just a few months after starting this panel. Three members of that panel are now on the Rock Falls and/or Sterling City Council. The group is also tasked with community-wide initiatives like Sterling Riverfront Project, a housing survey, a welcome home initiative, and mural projects. This has worked out really, really well. Now, it was a few years later. In fact, it was just a couple years ago. I did the same program with a young adult panel in Marion, Illinois. And this came out of Southern Illinois Now. It's a magazine in Southern Illinois. And this is a quote from Jennifer Olson, Director of Business Development at the City of Marion. Through Marion Connects, young Marion residents are building stronger connections to their community and actively collaborating with the city to enact the positive changes. This has led to tangible benefits, including increased foot traffic downtown, an influx of business openings, and heightened investment in building revitalization efforts. I am highly recommending for anyone who is in county government, city government, village government, that if you do not have a young adult panel that is culturally diverse, you need to develop one. Now, the one in Marion is associated, it's actually a part of the city council. Okay, it is delegated from the city council. The one at the Sauk Valley Chamber is through the chamber or connected to the chamber. So there's different ways you can pull it in. I highly recommend this. And then you get the feedback from young adults. Remember, Centralia just was lucky enough to get all these young real estate developers, business owners, chamber directors. They were young. So, they're coming in and having that influence over Centralia, I think made a huge difference. Oregon, Illinois went out to get a younger commissioner and bring her on board. And now they just let me know that February 24th, they're having a meeting to start their own young adult panel. So here are communities who have taken the time. And if you're in a small community or a small county where you can only get 2 or 3 adults, but again, culturally diverse, you want to make sure any panel you have in your community, any board you have, looks like the cultural diversity of your community, because if it isn't, people are not going to feel welcome. They're not going to feel engaged. They're not going to feel like they matter or they're involved. And truthfully, I'd rather have people on my team than opposing my team or angry with my team. So I really encourage you to do this. Think about a young adult panel. I will send you that link to the young adult panel and how it was set up in Sterling, Illinois. And then finally, I want to thank these people for the hard work they've done and how hard they've worked. And hopefully, I wish I was going to be around long enough to do some surveys and find out how they were doing. But thank you, Marcus Holland, Thank you, Jennifer Olson. Thank you, Mayor Ken Williams and City Commissioner Terry Schuster. And thank you very much, Chris Noble. And that is the end of my program. This is my email. I am going to let Mike tell me if there's any questions, and we'll move on from here. But thank you so much for coming today. Mike, are you there?
Yes, indeed, Pam. We do have a couple questions.
Okay.
Michael asks, what if most downtown living spaces are all low-income spaces? How do you provide livable spaces for those folks if the community pushes for developing B&Bs or higher-end rentals for downtown buildings?
Hmm. Now, okay, I'm gonna look at that. They're low income because what if most downtown living are all low income spaces? Those folks, if the community, oh, you mean you're pushing them out of those low income spaces? Yes, Michael, I'm going to tell you that is, thank you, because you're taking a look at your culture, and gentrification can be a negative side to some of this downtown revitalization. I will agree with that. Um, Yes, that's a conundrum, and I would say that you want to make sure because yes, if they develop into B&Bs or higher end rentals, then they're going to push people out. To be honest with you, most of the communities I'm talking about, those upper spaces were completely empty. They were not pushing out low income people. So I'm sorry, Michael, if I think of something though, I'm writing your name down. I will send you something if I have any examples. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer to that. Mike, do we have anything else?
We do. Kevin asks, what do you consider a pop-up business?
Okay, there's several ways to do a pop-up business. Pop-ups can happen in vendor markets. Pop-ups can happen inside stores, which by the way, I think Kurt Beatty might still be on from LaSalle. You want to talk about, he's got a retailer downtown, and Kurt, if you're still on, throw her name in the chat box. She did two pop-ups. One, she did a Barbie pop-up right after the movie Barbie came out. And I know you can hate Barbie, love Barbie, but that movie grossed 1.3 billion in ticket sales worldwide. So, and it also had a line around the block in downtown LaSalle for that Barbie pop-up shop. She also did a Taylor Swift pop-up in her right inside her retail shop to draw in more customers. Another example of a pop-up. I've had pop-up shops that would like they grilled meats that would pop up in front of a in front of a bar on 4th of July. A pop-up is just that. And when people say that they want to start these indoor pop-up, like incubators, to me, that's not a pop-up. Pop-ups pop up and they pop down. Now they might come back every Friday for the summer because it's a vendor market, but that's what a pop-up is. I've also read the research and seen it happen myself in Rockford. Wherever they pop up the most, it's most generally when they go to build out into a building, they're going to build out right where they've been popping up. So get them downtown. And that's one thing I tell everyone is if you've got an event or a vendor market or whatever, don't put it in a park outside of town. Don't go outside of town, bring it downtown. If you want to revitalize your downtown and you want arts, music, food, you want to bring it downtown, everything downtown. So, and I think that's what a lot of these communities are doing that have been so successful. Okay, Mike, any
Next
more?
question. Absolutely. In fact, we've got several more.
Okay,
We've got a question. How much of a role should counties play with town downtowns?
okay. Counties just need to help the communities do what they can do. First of all, I think counties can look at their role in the infrastructure, whether it's broadband, roads, whatever they can supply for that, being supportive of it. There's just a lot of ways that they can get involved. Another thing too is what I'm running into in some smaller rural communities are code enforcement. If the counties can help in any way for these small rural communities, I know some of them are trying to share code enforcement officers, maybe the codes that are developed to share those between the communities so they have them. There's really a lot of ways counties can help, but they're probably going to do more of that infrastructure and making sure that what young people need coming into into the towns or what the downtowns need is there, and it's something they can work on at a county level. Okay. How I'm looking at another question here, Mike. Mike, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
We've got a couple more questions,
Okay, keep going.
two in particular that are related. One is from a small business owner who's a millennial, owns a coffee shop and a 24/7 gym with some
Ooh.
other spaces. They'd like to know, how can I, as an individual, attract other people like me aside from cold emailing people from nearby larger areas? They've got two other spaces for rent next to their businesses. So they've got some business space, some commercial space to rent. They want to know how to attract folks from elsewhere into the region.
I would say social media is probably the most powerful. I do have another program that talks about it though, that millennials generally aren't on and Gen Zers generally are not on Facebook, although you could use Facebook. But you might want to use your Instagram accounts and other accounts that you might have to get that message out. In Nashville, Illinois, they actually started an online young adult chamber of commerce because they didn't feel like they were getting the support of the chamber that was there. So social media is a really good way, and just letting people know that you're really enjoying what is the experience there and how much fun you can have. I wonder if this young man is connected to the 24-hour gym in downtown Oregon. That is probably one of the it's a really great example of what can be done in a downtown. It's a 24-hour gym downtown with a pass key. Now, I don't know if I'd want an apartment upstairs because they blast the music, but it has been very, very popular. And of course, especially for the younger generations because it is a gym. I hope that answers it, Mike. Was that it for questions or we got any more?
No, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay. What are some, again, this question, basically you answered with the previous one. What are some methods to promote available, remodel, and revitalize downtown buildings?
And I go back to, okay, if you're going for young adults, newspapers and TV aren't going to work. Okay, they rarely do that. You're going to have to find them where they live, and that is on social media. And it's not necessarily you have a Facebook account. I'm not denying that because a lot of young adults are still on Facebook because they want to keep track of other people. But you really need to use social media to get out there and just get out to your friends, and then hopefully others will reshare that. By the way, Mike, Kurt did post, it's Amia Boutique in LaSalle that did those two pop-ups for Barbie and Taylor Swift and sold merchandising. It was an amazing way to bring people into a retail environment. So, but yeah, definitely. You had mentioned festival zones in a past webinar. How does a village go about starting the process of getting a festival zone? If you go out on the Rockford, Illinois website, you should be able to track down their festival zone policy. That policy was actually used in Mount Vernon, Illinois, although they made a couple of changes. But Rockford, Illinois has a really good festival zones. It's outlined as to what streets can be shut down when, what the process is for applying. And that way, what happened is the city didn't have to worry about doing all the events themselves. People could come in and do their own events, their own pop-ups. And there were certain areas that they could actually shut down. Mount Vernon used it. I think Greenville, Illinois used it. I'm trying to think of who else used those festival zones, but just go to the Rockford, Illinois government's website. And I think all you have to do is put festival zones in and you should be able to get there. If not, you could see my email on the screen, I hope. So just go ahead and email me for more information if you can't find it yourself. Okay. I know I've got it somewhere.
We are getting close to the end of our time. Let's take a
Okay.
moment to put up a quick poll question, and then we'll take one final question. And that final question is from Robert, who is asking, do you have a favorite success story having to do with job creation in a small town? Something that other rural communities can try?
Um, Job creation is, actually, I really feel like you want to talk about success stories. I would call those people that I had, and I would start with Marcus Holland because there had to be an enormous amount of job creation considering what I talked about, whether it's you got to have contractors that built out all of those apartments he's talking about and the wine bar. You've got the young adults there. You've got people moving into the town. With all those businesses being created, either the entrepreneurs have their own business, their own job, or you've done it. But I think all of those, I don't really look at the job creation. I should, because there has to be some job creation that surrounds every single one of these successes that I've talked about. And I know in Rockford downtown that there's obviously there were no businesses down there for a while. Now you can't even rent a first story to put a shop or a restaurant in. So there's got to be tons of job creation there. Like I said, I just don't necessarily follow that, Robert. I see your question there.
All right. That pretty much sums up the questions we've had. We will make the recording available and all the resources, as Pam has noted, to participants and registrants via email. So if you didn't register, again, just drop your email into the chat box and we'll be sure to add you to the distribution list for those materials. On behalf of University of Illinois Extension, I do want to thank Pam again for her presentation.
You're
If
welcome.
you
And thank you, Mike, for having me and Nancy. And it's been wonderful. Thanks so much. And thanks everybody for coming.